Picking up a piece from last time we were taping, I wanted to try and jam something else up your nose, to your mind, to your attention. You remember the scenario I was making up about the little group that was stationed down in Antarctica, and they had a radio operator, and he was their only link to the outside world for some period of time, if you recall. And at the time I was making it up, I went ahead and said something such as, the ultimate story I think to come up with was that he had dropped, in some way, broken the radio, and so he didn't want to tell anyone, or that he was the only one who could operate the radio, which is a little shaky nowadays, as far as the story. But that did not have anything to do with the story, recall, that he was the source for all the information, all the news they got in and out, as far as they knew, for 6 months, and he was actually sitting there all day, the hours he worked, and nothing was happening, and him just simply making this up and writing it down. Well, what I wanted to try to get you to turn around and look even a little curiouser, do you understand in that story, in the setup to the story, that it's not really necessary that I had thrown in the part that he was the only one who could operate the radio, or that, well, that was the basis of the story, the setup, that you understand that's not necessary for the story, that it actually requires. Now, I'm going past the story, as always, in just a second, but it requires no real conditioning. It does not require that I actually say that 50 people went down there and he was the only one who could operate the radio. And so, therefore, he is the one who had the monkey grip on incoming news. He is the one through which everything must be channeled, as if no one else could operate the radio, as if 49 other sophisticated, reasonable people could not take over the radio and figure out how to work it if they didn't know already. That is not necessary. In such a scenario, before we get into the more expansive side, in such of a story, as always, life is not wired up in such a way to take that picture that the other 49 that were there for their own jobs, and he was the radio person, the radio man, it would never, under any ordinary conditions, under most routine occurrences there for 6 months, it would never, quote, occur to anyone to want his job, to question what he was doing. All they had to do, again, assuming he was well-read enough, sophisticated enough in the ordinary sense, that he could sit there and he daily makes up the news. There's trouble in Russia. There's an uprising so-and-so. Then every day, perhaps, he says something about the Dow Jones is up 22 points today. But then tomorrow it falls back 19. Then the next day, it seems to be rebounding because of growing confidence in the market after the little fall yesterday, but now it's back up 14 points. And of course that was Friday, and so the exchange is closed, and then Monday has a new story. As long as things just went like that, it would never cross the other people's mind to question the man. You understand? It's not that they could not operate the radio, and it's not that somebody's going to say, wait a minute, for some reason we think you're sitting there making that up. As long as things stayed within a certain tolerance, which takes into account, all you got to do is watch the news. See, right now, or before I did this to you Wednesday, you assumed that what you heard and saw on the news actually happened. So let's just assume that's true. It's still like up and down. Congress, when it's in session, is wrestling with the president, with the executive branch. And the president's plan today seems to be doomed in some area, new health bill. But then tomorrow, wait a minute, there seems to be a bipartisan group seems to ad hocly been drawn together, and now they're threatening to bring forth their own bill. In other words, Congress is getting the upper hand. But then the next day, the president says, that may well be, but you pass that particular bill and I'll veto it. You got my word on it. So it's back down. So it seems to be up and down, but it's within a kind of tolerance. You understand that. You do not turn on the news and something shocking happened. You don't turn on the news and find out that the world's been destroyed while you were asleep. Now, back to where I was trying to get you to look, even with the story last time we were taping. Even more so, just as much, but even more so, is this true when you begin to look at, if you could get a grip on what I was talking about, how you were personally formed and informed by life. Not only, as I was hinting, perhaps you have been tricked. That's the first word that came to mind. In some way you'd been tricked that all of the information, all of the knowledge, all of the suggestions, all the so-called beliefs were fed to you by an operator not actually taking in information. But now, I will assume that all of you at least heard that literally last time we were taping, whether you liked it or not. But now consider, at that level, if we're now talking about the individual and what seems to be the formation of his intellect, the individual's personality, it has never crossed anyone's mind to question the legitimacy of the source. Until now, of course. Now, some of you are involved with this. But in ordinary life, it never crosses anyone's mind. Now, this does not mean that people do not argue, of course. But it does not cross their mind to question the legitimacy of the source. They may say, well, the person over here, I got this information from my boss. Or somebody came around trying to collect money for a political cause, and they told me so-and-so, and I don't believe it. They were talking about the greenhouse effect, and they were talking about, I don't believe that. But you understand this, it's very tricky, but no one questions the legitimacy of the source. You can say, well, the source is wrong in this case. The people trying to push this particular cause, the people giving me this information. Like a foreign religion, an alien religion to you, if you were an ordinary person and religious. You'd say, well, I'm not a Muslim. And Islam, I know a little bit about it. I know that they're just not civilized. They're not Christians, that's for darn sure. And so, but you don't question the legitimacy of the source. The source to you is wrong, but you don't question the fact that what if there's no such thing as Islam? But then you would say, well, there has to be. There has to be as much the reality of Islam as there is my religion, Christianity, Judaism. Right. You're safe. But what if there is no such thing as Islam? Of course, if that were true, then there is no such thing as your religion. No one questions, now back to the parable, that everything that you know, and everything that you know, of course, is what constitutes in the loose definition of one's personality, one's individuality, is not your hip size, your bust size, and with men other distinguishing features, the size of your nose. It is not how talented you are. It is not whether you can sing, dance, whistle. It is not whether you can write poetry or whether you have the good taste to denounce poetry. Something made me say that. I didn't. The New Yorker made me say that. That wasn't my fault. That is not the basis of an ordinary person's so-called personality. It's right here at the end of the nervous system. The whole sense of you being an individual is not just you physically, although we'll say that most people disresemble one another physically, that there is something distinguishing about you physically. But surely you hear what I'm saying. That doesn't amount to anything. That is not what everyone feels as being their personality. Rightly so. Because the only place that life has people wired up to where there seems to be any pertinence to a sense of individuality that is lacking in all other even sentient creatures on this planet is here. That's personality, and that's the intellect. That is where the nervous system is still growing, is in the human brain. So there is what I want you to see. What if the information, which is the formation of the intellect, and thus of the so-called individual personality, what if that was coming through what amounted to, back to the metaphor, this radio operator? Except this radio operator is, if you want to take it real simple, is like in charge of the Milky Way, let's say, and specifically our solar system. And so the information is coming to him, and for whatever reason, he broke the radio, he dropped it. Maybe he's been fired and they forgot to take away his position. But at any rate, he's sitting there making up this information, except I'll also give him this much credit in my parable, that he would be as sophisticated, as ordinarily hip, well-read, able to fake it as my radio operator in the other picture, in the other story, could in the camp down in Antarctica. So this guy's sitting outside here somewhere, over there just past the edge of the Milky Way. And he is hip enough, not at our level, because you don't know from nothing. He's taking the information that should be coming in, that he already knows about, but is no longer coming in because he broke the radio. And so he is now faking it. He is now making up the information, sending down to planet Earth, because it's got to come down. That's his job, and he hadn't been relieved of it just because he broke the damn radio, or whatever it was. He is now making it up. Would you know the difference? Yeah, hold your breath. And this is not to say that this is actually true, even if I knew it. The question right now that you should be entertaining is to realize that no one, you're just not wired up. It's not because you never thought about it or no one would let you. It is not part of the normal wiring system. The chemical priming of the intellectual pump in man's brain, it never crosses anyone's mind to question at all the legitimacy. You can argue about it. You can say, well, I don't like the way I was raised. Let's get personal. I do not like the way my parents treated me. They forced me to go to parochial school. I hate what the nuns did to me, or whatever. Now, you can say that. And it's not only this operator, perhaps, talking to you, but it's now you talking to you. It's now a secondary version of him feeding you information because you're telling you that you don't like it. No one questions the legitimacy of this. Not to agree or disagree, but no one questions the fact of, what if all that was made up? Because then immediately the intellect says, well, to hell with it being made up. I remember it. Are you sure? Well, I was there. I remember the nuns taking those sticks and beating on me. I was there. Are you sure? Are you sure that that happened? Even if it did happen, are you sure that that happened? What if everybody's own individuality is, in a real sense, not three-dimensional, because it certainly cannot be proven and it's not even correct at the three-dimensional level. That is, it does not have sufficient simplistic aspects to it to make it be a correct reality at the three-dimensional level. But I can go ahead and say it. What if it turned out that everybody's individuality is an invention? Now, I could almost get some people in the ordinary world to say, well, everybody's personality is an invention. It has to do perhaps a little with your genetic background, and of course a whole lot with your environment. And so in a way, we have been sort of invented. No, not sort of. What if it in a real way is an invention? In the same way that I'm trying to get you to see that guy is sitting there in Antarctica, and he's going, yes. Guys, is anybody interested in the college basketball? Maybe he says, what teams you're interested in? They say, right. Wake Forest. He says, oh, Wake Forest. Well, bad news. And he absolutely made it up. There's nothing coming in. Now, can you put that in any way together with what seems to be you? You have no basis at the ordinary building side of intelligence to think about it this way, but that everything you know, all your memories, all the information, all your opinions, everything that even ordinary sophisticated intelligence would tell you is unconscious levels of thought and belief. That all of it, somebody made up, but no one is primed up to ever say, could I listen to those earphones? I never heard a radio. Of course, if you had to ask that, you might get your head popped. But notice, in the same way as when I started out expanding the story for you, I assume you hear the validity of what I'm saying. 50 guys, 50 people sent to Antarctica, all specialists, all reasonable, all intelligent with their jobs, and one of them is radio man. As long as things stay within a certain realm of reality, which, in case you don't know, is going to stay there. It's only ordinary people that think, well, something very untoward could happen. Such as man about to destroy the planet. Right. Can't fool that person. Within the bounds, within the limits of reality, you understand it's not humor, it's trying to get you to see, everything stays within the bounds of reality. So as long as this operator stays within reasonable bounds, that is, as long as he doesn't turn around and he says, Jesus, call everybody in here. I've just received word over the BBC overseas. They say it's 2,000 miles long. It's a cigar shape. It's just landed in New York. Where? In Queens, not in Queens. And if he started something like that, And guess who's on it? It seems to be piloted by, are you sure? Casey Stengel is piloting. All right, now if he did something like that and people say, oh, what, is this April Fool? And he went, no, it's true. Then you understand, they might say, we better wrestle old Johann down and somebody getting this radio, the man's cracked up. Right? But, notwithstanding that sort of thing, which is not going to happen, the kind of person that might do that, that's possible in life, a mutant somewhere, you do understand by now, surely is not the kind who would end up in a select group of 50 experts in something sent to Antarctica. So that will never happen. Thus, the people involved, the other 49, will never have any cause to say, do you think he just sits there for 14 hours a day and makes this up? Surely you hear I've used the story now for so long that some of you can picture it happening. But now jump back. Surely your ordinary intelligence tells you, that's all you need to rely on, that none of those 49 would ever be sitting around, couldn't think of anything to do. They've worn out all the playboys. They're falling apart. And one guy says, you know what I was thinking? I believe that radio guy sits there all day at that desk, and I think he makes this up. Right. He sits there, goes on duty, sits there 14 hours a day, takes a break every now and then, but usually eats there because the job is so important to us. Yeah, he's sitting there making it up. No one ever questions the validity of the source, whatever it was called, which I'm not going to try to identify it any more specifically for you than me making up my little radio man that's in charge of disseminating the information here to our whole solar system. But just think about, call it anything you want to. It's almost impossible to put a small name, but every piece of information you ever receive, which you cannot exclude experience, because your experience doesn't count unless you think about it, unless you remember it. It doesn't matter that the nuns beat you with a stick, unless they broke your leg and you look down and you think your leg's broke, but then you got to remember it, because if you didn't remember that, you could just look down and think, well, I was born like this. So even if it seems to be your experience, we're still talking about information. We're still talking about if you are a regularly middle-class, bourgeois, functioning piece of the intellectual part of life's nervous system, then even your experience is now thought, whatever it was that happened. What if all of this came to you through very questionable sources? What if it came to you through sources that had no validity? That's pretty strong. Let's go back to my story. What if it was channeled through you and the guy sending down the information, the girl, the woman, the person, the thing that sent down the information through some circumstance has been making it up? Then there is the question I presented to you last time of what difference would it make? Now, on the widespread level, your guess, as it should have been last time, was, well, evidently it wouldn't make any difference, because if it was true, I don't know what the difference would be. But now take it personally, individually. What difference would it make to you? To ordinary people, it wouldn't make any difference because they couldn't believe it. They couldn't really hear it. Now I ask you, back at the old level of what you seem to be, what difference would it make? Now, if you can get off that spot, I suggest to you it makes a lot of difference. Because you think you've been wrestling with you all this time, you think you've had problems, you think you've got debts, you think you have debits, you think you've either had a good life, a bad life, an indifferent life, an eclectic life. What if all of that, take any description and you go, okay, and whatever yours seemed to be, it was still on the basis that somebody made it up. That is, this guy turned to you sometimes, he'd say, your wife just sent word that she's divorcing you. And she got a good attorney, and they're going to take everything you got, so there's no need for you to even come back home. So he tells that to one guy. And then he calls another guy and says, oh, Dr. So-and-so, he says, we just found out you won the lottery. Well, we just found out that the Nobel Committee, well, no, you hadn't, well, okay. You're on the list of 3. Nobody's supposed to know it was a leak. They got the word out, and somebody, you're on the list. And you over here, sir. You understand, it would seem to be different from person to person. So one guy's life is now in turmoil. Another guy is all excited. But the guy is still sitting there going, yes, yes, yes. And he's hearing nothing. He's making it up. And that's you. Something else from the last taping. You recall I said if any of you are interested in a kind of test as to how am I doing in this? And I gave you a question. Well, I gave you a statement, and I said the question was, does it make any sense to you? And if it does, you could use that as some sort of gauge as to how you're doing. Notice I didn't say if it proved this or that. Well, even I have my standards. The question, or the statement I gave you for you to ask the question, you recall I said if somebody with a certain kind of subversive neural expansion had decided, for instance, to not throw garbage out of the car as they're driving along, that if they did so, it would not be on the basis of any reason, no reason known, pro or con. It would be on the basis that they decide to do it. Does that make any sense to you? Which is, I was going to say that if that was too sticky and difficult for some of you, I was going to give you a second variation. That same question, does this make any sense to you now? But I was going to give you a different story, different statement. Not really a story this time. So let's try this. Remember, the test is for you to ask yourself, does this following statement now make any sense to me? And the statement would go something like this: that the anecdote to the jejune, the inefficacious, the dull, the boring, the common, as in commonly believed, commonly done, would the anecdote to such commonness be other than I'll have to make a more statement for you to ask your question. Here we go again. The anecdote for the common would be not in the joining of the equally impotent rebellion against the common. Did anybody besides me follow that? The true resistance to that which is common, and that which is common was what I was inferring. I didn't infer hell when I said jejune and inefficacious, that it would be equally impotent to rebel against that in the ordinary sense. So the test is, ask yourself, does that make any sense to me? Now, if you're back at the old building side intellectually, no matter who you are, it does not make any sense. It's worse than that. It is insensible. It is irrational. Ordinary rebellion operates like this, though, out in the routine world. The visible rebels are actually the king's bastard sons. So anybody that rebels against anything, and what they're rebelling against, of course, is visible to start with. It's got to be known to the ordinary level of intelligence. And then anyone who rebels visibly against that, you're back playing tar baby. You're back in the dance. There is no way to pertinently, potently be a visible rebel against anything known. That is not the anecdote. That is not the opposite. The opposite of something is not its opposite. Not in the subversive sense. It cannot be. If it were, then what little of this kind of stuff goes on would not be going on. Then anything that you thought you didn't like or anything, just whatever struck you that, well, I don't like that. I'm going to rebel against that. I'm against that. Then this would be just moments, I guess ordinary people would call it, of just almost non-stop epiphanies and just enlightenment over and over. And if you couldn't think of anything to do, perhaps you'd just look in the entertainment guide, your weekly paper, under rebellion and hostility, and find out what group's going on, and call them up and say, what are you guys against? And if it's something you never thought about, go, hey, I like that. That'll do for the weekend. But the opposite of something in the 3D world is not its opposite. You're not dealing with any form of rebellion. At least starting off in external matters, let me spring it a little further for you. Start off with external, what appear to be affairs. I can use an ordinary word. In matters of espionage, fifth column work, it could be said that the best secret agent would be one that would betray either side. Now, you'd have something. But now consider it further. Now forget out there. It's true out there. And I don't know how ordinary people would... Well, that does happen. They just don't have any occasion, I guess, to codify it in words. But the best spy, think about it, would be one with no nationalistic, religious, limiting allegiances. But anyway, now back to something, the aspect of it being individual, internal, and personal. In the same way, you should realize that to be a real revolutionist, to be a neural subversive, you can have no intellectual loyalties. A real revolutionist has got none. So, in that sense, he would be, to himself, the epitome of a cold-blooded, chill-baned spy, subversive, because he'd be willing to betray anybody, using betray in the sense of ordinary affairs, because he would have no intellectual loyalties. You could look at it almost as being a kind of spatial troubadour. Carried far enough, you'd become almost a renegade in time. As far as the development of your own nervous system, as far as your own thought processes, you would be a person with no regular employer. See, some of the several things that we've been talking about for the last few tapings, if your intelligence is operating at the ordinary level, wherein you can only entertain, you only have attention that will focus on one door knock at a time, calling for your attention. Even if you end up railing against what seemed to be knocking at your door, or even if you hear the knock and you think, I know who that is, I know what ideas those are, you have loyalty. Your loyalty is to the door. You have an allegiance to the door. Well, have you already forgotten the example I was going to give that seems like more and more people are perfectly primed now. Just ordinary people, you're walking down the street and somebody jump out with a microphone and you don't know who it is. The end of the microphone will be stuck in their back pocket. They say, may we ask you some personal questions? People go, yes, certainly. Yeah, I've got time. Go ahead. They don't know who it is. They just say, but that is still the basis that life has always been operating. It's like this operator says, I got a message coming in. What was your name again? They go, oh, my name's so-and-so. No, it wasn't for you. Or if he says, oh, yes, it was for you. Now you've given it away. He says, oh, Johnson, you're the one that's I'm a physicist. Yeah, the physicist. Well, you've given it all away. Because I say you're giving it all away. Who's telling you to say all that? Well, I don't know. That's what I am. Nobody has to tell me to say that. I know my name's Johnson, and I'm a physicist, and I'm in Antarctica. I know that. May we ask you a few questions? Certainly. No one ever asked, how did I, not only did they not notice they're on a merry-go-round, but no one ever asked, how did I get here? Oh, I know that you may think they do, which is the basis of all these corporate mythologies. Well, there was a god. I forgot his name now. What was it? Larry. But nobody figures, how did I get on this merry-go-round? Why do I think I'm on a merry-go-round, that you call it this? Why do I think this is my horse? Why do I think I am the horsey? Why do I think I'm in front of some people? Why do I think that others are behind me? what ordinary people call belief, any belief, and this is not much of a stretch of the King's English even, but any belief is absolutely welded to loyalty. Of course, all talk is welded to loyalty. That you believe that words have some meaning, and that you believe that you know what you're saying, and that you believe that the person you're talking to some degree, perhaps a little urging or perhaps a slap across the head, will finally understand what you're saying. But it is a loyalty. I suggest to you what I call a real revolutionist until we come up with another term, like a fried weenie sandwich or something. A real revolutionist has got no intellectual loyalties. Anytime you've got an intellectual loyalty, then you're no longer a real revolutionist. And you may be shaking your fist at some word, some idea, some group of people, and believe that, yes, I am cerebrally at the barricades. No, you're not. Oh, you may be, but you're out there. Look where you are. You're surrounded by other people at the barricades. And if you're surrounded by other people and you're all shouting not just necessarily exactly the same thing, but anything similar, that is, it's similar, or else you're shouting the opposite, which is similar. If you're doing that, you're not rebelling. It's just a hobby. Don't take it serious. It's like learning how to repair shoehorns or something. You're just engaged in a secondary activity. In a real sense, that I could make this sound absolutely impossible in words, because the weight of the words on the planet anyway. But it is almost as though, to do this, that you are truly like a freelance thinker. But it's not in any way that I could say to an ordinary group of people, and some of them go, yeah, I know what you mean. When it wasn't hip, I had a beard and long hair. And now that I look around, there are guys 60 years old with long hair and beards. I got myself a crew cut and shaved my face clean. I'm a rebel. You're not a rebel. You're still employed. You're still taking the news coming in. You took the news to be, at one time, let's say that you were in the 60s, for instance. I assume you followed it. You took the news to be all that stuff about don't trust people over 30, that somebody just discovered that. And hey, if you let your hair grow real long, if you're a man and it gets real long like a woman, it gives old people goddamn fits. They can't stand it. And so you had all these people run up to a barricade and clocking themselves. How fast will my hair grow? Is it down to my shoulders? That is not rebellion. You're still employed. You're still taking the information. The information, they said, how old are you? You went, 19? Yeah, you're the one I'm looking for. It's been reported. I just got news that there's some, are you serious? Some men, young men, let their hair grow real long like a woman. And what happened? It gave their parents and some other old farts fits. Some other old fits fart. What? Oh. You took that information. And you went, yeah, I'll grow my hair. And then later on, the information came out. Do you realize, do you look around that there are guys now as old as your father, and their hair is way down, way over their collar? Do you realize that? And suddenly, you looked around, you know, like an idiot. Your father had hair like that for the last 10 years, just like yours. And he had a mustache bushier than yours, and you looked around. Jesus, that's true. What'd you do? More rebellion. But it's not rebellion. Not that that is of any great consequence, but then you've got to take that into the area of how you think, of what it seems to be the basis of you passing for some sort of individual. Because it's not, of course, hair and mustaches, but you thinking, well, I don't believe what my father believed. I don't believe what my religious group, my original peers believe. I don't believe what the majority of the people in my particular tribe believe politically. That's of no consequence. You're still employed. You're still one of the perhaps unrecognized, if you're not, you're working for them, bastard, illegitimate sons of the king. They're just out playing the barricades. Hey, let's all tell the king to stuff it. They can say that. Assuming that the king's one of the families, the king's one of the dimensions for a second. He's height. And you find breadth and width. These two scuffy-looking little individuals, and they're running around Molotov cocktails. That is what seems to be explosive ideas, which... Right. But you see them wandering around the castle, trying to get people to, hey, let's join in. It turns out, I'm telling you now, you don't have to wait. All such ordinary rebellion, all such mechanical naysaying, all such automatic setting up of barricades, then threatening to overrun the barricades and storm the castle. The forces running that are the illegitimate sons of the king. That is, if the king dies, your leader's going to be gone. No, not to Chattanooga somewhere. He's going to be on the throne. And you say, hey, don't you remember me? I used to be out there helping you. Now, remember, we're talking about ideas. You're going to say, don't you remember, you used to be a rebel. And suddenly he may come up with some sort of, when I was a child, I spake as a child. Now I'm king. Cut out that crap. Forget rebels and castles. That's what happens to what seems to be the thought processes, the individual perceptions of reality with people, is they think, many of them, well, I'm going to expand myself. I'm going to think new thoughts, or I don't believe what everybody else believes. In fact, a lot of what people believe, especially in this area, is almost, well, I'll just say it, it's diametrically incorrect. That's really rebellion, because at the ordinary level, it's not sarcasm. To be absolutely against something, that is the definition of rebellion. To be in direct opposition of whatever it is. The capitalistic system. Are you truly against it? Or Marxism? Whatever. Yes. All of it? Yes. Do you know enough about it? Yes, I know enough about it. But are you just kind of wishy-washy? You just say, well, I don't like the free market enterprise because of one or two. No, I know enough about it. In fact, I've got credentials. I'm majored in political science. I am telling you, I am against it from alpha to omega, from the left wing to the right wing. Now, would that not fit if we're talking about the area of politics? That guy is the epitome. He is a living example of the opposite, right? It's no form of rebellion. It's nothing. The antidote to the common is not to join in the common resistance. That is not rebellion. That is not the preparation, much less the beginning of construction on any new neural building site. I just mentioned it in passing last time we were taping, but I might as well hit it again. As we mentioned several tapings back, there is a way in which you can very clearly see life using, amongst other purposes, but using talk as being a kind of defense to the developing, to the pubescent intellect, that talk acts as a kind of quite proper, quite efficient defense. But to be a real revolutionist, you've got to be able to take talk for your own personal reason, which is a form, of course, of thought, but to be able to take talk and turn it into an individual offensive tool. Now, of course, that does not mean to try in some way to verbally hurt other people when I say offensive tool. Offensive tool / teaching aid. But that's what you do with your own talk. That's what you do with your own thought. Not as a defense anymore. There's nothing to defend. Well, if you think your own intellect, that is, if you think that you personally, up to the point before you ever got involved with this, if you're involved with this, and if there is such a thing as this, and if you're still here. Now, I know you may think you are, but if all those ifs are covered, then you know, you would have to know by now that what you have taken to be you up until now, no sham humility, no nothing. You just realize there is nothing to be defended. It cannot be changed. It was based on information from what now should strike you as being at least suspect sources. especially since you can't even name them. You can't even actually point to where they were. But whatever they were, it's got to be suspect. If not, why don't the bastards come on out and say, all right, we're the ones that told you this. No. Nobody will fess up. You can't get anybody. Forget ordinary humans. You know this by now. You can't tell your mother, do you realize I'm a physical and emotional wreck because of you? Hey, no. Everybody knows forget that, but you can't even turn in what seems to be transcendental areas. You can't turn and say, all right, who calls me like this? Where's the collective consciousness, the collective unconsciousness? Where are the gods? Where are the myths? Somebody step out and tell me who's responsible for me being like this. If you can find that guy with that funny backyard I told you about that's right at the edge of the universe, go. If he'll let you in, go in his backyard and center up the edge and shout out, well, all right, try this. Don't sound as aggressive as I was doing the theatrics. Just try to slip up and go out there and just kind of look around and go, yoo-hoo. So, who's responsible for me being like this? Try to say it pleasantly. And, maybe you'll trick them that they'll actually answer. There is nothing to defend. It's not sham humility. It's not anybody saying, well, boy, I know I was never a good person. It's to leave the snakeskin if you're going to move. You got to shed it. You just got to walk away from it. It's not good or bad. There's nothing to rebel against. You don't look back and go, boy, that was horrible. You don't look back and say, well, it wasn't bad. There's nothing to say. It is then that you can use your own talk. It is then, in a sense, I suggest to you that and sometimes I have even said you sort of teach yourself. How about another way? What if you can plug in to another source of information? Don't get all misty-eyed and mystical in the ordinary sense, or you're back at some kind of beige, if not petunia-colored barricades that are of no consequence. But what if instead of whoever it is that's going and making up all this and saying it to you, what if there is like a spurious, like a pirate radio station, and there's other information coming in? Of course, if this kind of stuff exists, if you're not still at home in bed dreaming all of this, then you've got to admit this kind of stuff comes from somewhere else. I mean, even somebody say, well, wait a minute, some of this is interesting, most of it's insane, and as far as I'm concerned, you made it all up. Okay, I made it all up. But how did I make it all up? The guy sat there and he made all this up, except all his stuff at Antarctica, it stayed within the limits of people going, yeah. Oh, well, Dow Jones up, now it's down. But this stuff is not within the limits. So even if I made it up, how did I make it up? Or, look at it another way, we're not trying to make this personal to me. What if you don't really hear exactly what I say, and now you've got your own little operator sometimes, and now you're making up what you think I'm telling you. And what you're making up is, as they used to say, is beginning to, if not blow your mind, begin to sound like perhaps a fuse is lit and something may happen. So if you're doing that to yourself, and don't worry about me, now how are you doing that? That you're now making up stuff that's not simply insane, it's not simply in direct opposition to ordinary sanity, that you're now beginning to sort of, I hate to say it, but sort of think along lines that do not sound dissimilar, if they were put in words, to the kind of stuff you hear when we're taping. So if you're doing that, let's forget about somebody sending messages. Let's forget about me sending you a message that you now think you're hearing something, and now you are, let's put it this way, perhaps making up stuff in even a weirder way. So if that be true, and you're not nuts, because if you're nuts, you're just back at the barricade, that you're still being able to circulate, make your way through the city in ordinary affairs, and yet now, up here, at many times, you're somewhere else. Not out of touch. You're not outside the loop. You're quiet, aware of everything that's going on, except you can see it in a different way. Not theoretically, not to please somebody, not to be part of an organization, and you don't see it along lines that me or somebody said, all right, now here's the way to look at that. It's just you begin to see it. In other words, you begin to make up your own stuff. So, if you do that, then I got to ask you, how are you able to do that? Of course, if you stop and you really wonder why, it's almost impossible not to go back to work. That is, to go back to your normal employer. Well, everybody has to sometimes, but you have to go back and go, well, You're back on the clock. But now that I drew that picturization, the only question is to a real revolutionist is, all right, if I were to stay on the clock, if I were to give this up and just go back on the clock, go back to work, what in the hell, how am I going to be paid off when my time comes? When I hit 70 or whatever it is, when my day comes, I know how everybody else gets paid off. Because if you knew anything, you'd know by then, without me telling you. But you know how everybody else gets paid off. You get paid off right at the end. When the contract is executed on you. When one of your best friends finds you and the hitman takes over, and the contract on each and every person is finally executed. Pardon the word, but that's one of the definitions. When the contract is fulfilled, you are then paid off right quick. Here is your money for 70 years. Or I won't say money, here is your payment. The thing is, for somebody who understands, somebody who's got a different message, who's plugged in somewhere else, and everybody else doesn't know. They dream, they imagine life goes hint, hint, hint. Life goes, look at this, and life does this with Punch and Judy. But somebody that knows, I know how life's going to pay me off at the end. If I go back to work, I know exactly what the payment's going to be. Then a real revolutionist has got to ask himself, all right, if I do go back to work, since I'm hip to it, what are you going to pay me? Again, I hate to beat a cliche to death, but don't hold your breath. Because if you get any response, it's going to be more on the basis of one of my Kairos, like, the universe is going to have to say, or that guy's going to say, I'm going to have to get back with you on that. And don't hold your breath. Well, all such things is back, to take you back where I ran off the path a little bit, is using your own thought in a wide sense. We're running out of time for me to try to picture it much for, but that's why I was trying to get you to see. It's not just you sitting around normally thinking, as you should know by now. It's not you just sitting around and taking what seems to be somebody else's normal thought, some political idea, some religious notion, some whole system of thought, and going, well, since that didn't help me, since I grew up inside of this particular religious belief system, let's say, what I'll do is I'll just rebel against it. Everything it says not to do, I'll do, and everything it says to do or to think about, I won't. You've got to be able to use it. That is, your intellect, not the systems. To be able to use it no longer as some sort of defense to your own intellect, to protect you, to keep you alive here, to keep you stable here for 70 years so that life can say, well done, here's your payment. You have got to find out how to turn it into your own offensive tool, your own teaching aid. And when I was using the terms defense and offense, which if I'd never even gone into this offensive side, it still holds that all of you could still see, I suggest to you, along the viewfinder of looking at ordinary talk as being a form of defense that life has provided for this burgeoning intellect. It's like a cocoon almost. It is an armor. Not in any ordinarily seen sense, and not in any kind of ordinary sense of self-justification and all of that BS. That's BS Pulley. He's dead now, but God bless him. Or God damn him, I forgot which. Well, I didn't even know the man. Don't try to put his death on me. It's nothing to me. He no longer had a recording contract, so I don't get to say anything to live for. Either censor all that out of the tape or somebody find some books and look up and figure out what all that meant. I could have left it at the defense, that is, talk being a defense to the protection of a developing intellect. But to point out to you that it could be used as an offensive weapon, it struck me also one of the great loved, oft quoted, no longer tied to even the Western religions. It's used throughout the world now. This dream for the future. At such times when men's swords will be beaten into plowshares. Even Muslims and atheists and Buddhists now repeat that. Nobody knows why I brought that up. You don't see. where they stole it. It's to be able to turn the defense of ordinary talk and intellect, but the ordinary talk, into an offensive weapon. And for a real revolutionist, for any of you who can see him, well, thank you, sir or madam. Anybody can get any glimpse of that, then the whole idea of turning swords into plowshares doesn't begin to cover it. I mean, that's the best they could do. And it has a certain poetic ring to it, and even people not of the Judaic or Christian faith say that's a good idea. That would be a sign of true human progress, that we take our weapons of offense, and turn them into something that would be good for us. Like, and then a defensive weapon, that is plowshares that would protect our families and our health, to turn this weapon of destruction into a weapon of growth. That doesn't even get close. That's the best I could do. Not only does it not get close, it's almost backwards. Just almost. Because if it was completely backwards, it would almost be useful. But it's not. What you have to do, somebody doing this, is you have to be able to take the natural defensive weapon of talk, and learn how to use it offensively. Not on other people. It's not something that other people see, but you have to be able to do it here. And to do it, you can't simply turn it backwards. You can't simply turn a sword into a plowshare, or you couldn't turn a plowshare into a sword. If you could do either one, it wouldn't help. That is, you can't be on the king's side or think, well, no, the way I'm going to do this, I'm going out there behind the barricades and join up with the rebels. The rebels in the king's employ. They're related to him. None of the ordinary means of either trying to support or to join in with that which is common, that which is available, thought-wise, and other ways, but thought-wise, to go along with it or to go in the opposite direction is nothing. It will not change where you think. It will not put any real shock into an individual human nervous system. Well, let's see if we can close out the week right quick. How fast can I talk? Yeah. Related are, for those of you of more subtle sensibilities, how about this? Not totally unrelated to what I just said. Is there a difference? It sounds different, doesn't it? Related to, well, not completely unrelated to. Can you see this right quick? That the more that things, the affairs of ordinary life, automatically, mechanically become more complex, which they are, the more they do that, the trickier it is to become and to stay a revolutionist. You have to tap dance faster and faster. You have to be able to jump off the leaning tower in whatever time it would take you to drop. And let's say that you can slow it down just a millisecond by doing this. You're dropping faster and faster. You got to do more and more. It is trickier. I didn't say more difficult. It is trickier. Well, at one time, to be a real revolutionist. Now let's move back in the human nervous system. In history, for those of you with crude minds, if you got to think about it that way, which is true, back apparently in three-dimensional time, or if you can see it down in your own nervous system, inside of your own DNA, your own memory. At one time, to be a rebel, it was down further in the lower parts of the nervous system. You could have been a rebel at one time by simply refraining from killing your alien neighbor. That's still in recorded history. Look up the New Testament. Look in other areas in other parts of the world. There are mythologies that the rebels, those people that were oftentimes referred to as being godlike or superhuman, that is, people with some sort of astounding insight into life, they were considered rebellious. They were considered fanatical on the basis that they simply refused or tried to stop. Even if they just tried to stop. It made, the papers, because they had papers back then, just try to stop killing other people just because you didn't like their looks or because they lived on the other side of the river. I mean, that's almost the basis of the Western religion, 15, 17, 2,000 years. It's just, well, I'm really on the right track. That is humanity. We're really, us Christians or us Jews or whoever it is, we're really on the right track. For 2,000 years, we've really put our nose to the grindstone spiritually speaking. And we're almost to the point that some of us can sometimes go a day or so without killing somebody. All right. Besides a little humor in that, which is real, something beyond your cheap laugh. Do you realize now, for somebody to be a true revolutionist, a real neural subversive, that's nothing. And of course, I'm exaggerating that most people do not kill somebody else every day. But, let's see. A lot of people think about killing somebody else every day, right? One way or the other. Killing their ideas, stomping their idea. What a bad idea. Oh, I don't hate sinners. Here we go with Southern Baptist philosophy. I and God, of course, do not hate sinners. We hate their sin. That is not just their act, what they think. Now, things are getting so complex that it's even not enough in the ordinary sense for somebody to say, well, I refrain from killing my fellow man, therefore I'm an exceptional person. Yeah, but you got a lot of hostility. Oh, you got me there. Yeah, I do. Now admit it. Now you haven't killed anybody probably in your life. No, I haven't. But now admit it. Don't you get mad sometimes when somebody pulls up too close behind you on the freeway? Yeah, I do. Sometimes don't you think when you hear about somebody has killed a whole family and burned their house down that you think, Jesus, if somebody did that to my family, I wish I'd get hold of them even before the courts. I believe if nobody was looking, if I was really mad, I might even kill them. Hadn't you ever thought that? Yeah, I have. See, even that is no longer enough. Ordinary people. It's now into the mainstream of life that they should be rebelling even up here. Not that they can, but they believe it. It is trickier and trickier to be able to ever get this started in your own life and to keep it up. Because increasingly, as we stand here and speak, mechanically, out there in life, things are becoming the affairs, the secondary affairs of man, with no one's effort, requires no one's attention to it. They are becoming mechanically, just automatically, more and more complex, just almost minute by minute. So to do this becomes harder and harder. And I could even say, consider, any of those of you publicly minded are thinking about, if this sort of thing tried to take on some kind of public aspect, what's it against? And what chance do you stand if it was, let's say that somebody tried to do this. Somebody was involved with this at some time, said, all right, here it is, and we've got some sort of information, something you people could use. And they say, well, what are you against? And you say, well, we're against the status quo. Well, sort of. We're against ignorance and stupidity. And the average person, humanity, goes, well, and they look over here, and you have the religions, you have all political groups, and the religions say, ha, we're against evil. And the political groups say, we're against inequality. And humanity goes, huh. And it asks you again, if you were doing this, and you're against what? And you say, well, I'm sort of against just mechanical thinking. Come on, Martha, let's go over here and join. What chance have you got? That the difference is we got these other groups, institutionalized, big name, big money, which is not the point. But they are against something that's something. The religions are against evil itself. And political systems, they're against all forms of intolerance, injustice, poverty. And they turned back around to you and they said, and what is it your group's against? And of course, you didn't want to be against anything, but you finally had to say something. You said, well, we're against, don't take it personal, but we're against stupidity. Because they would want to take it personal, since they're not a member of the group, they assume that you're already against them, and you consider them stupid or they've been part of it. But at any rate, even past that, and they think, so I got my choice, I could join up and try to find out what this is, and they seem to be, they don't even want to admit they're against anything. But the most they'll say is they're against just common thinking. So I can either do this or join up a group that's against evil. I mean, we're talking about something evil. The evil and the injustice of the universe, and these people are against, as they put it, I'm quoting, they said they were sort of against just ordinary thinking. Video's still running, right? Okay. Well, we ran out of audio tape. I guess you people on video wonder what the hell. I do too. I don't know, but at any rate, we've got to stop. And it's probably just as well, right?